Okay, we're on. This is Chief. I'm a few days late with my weekly video. Today I'm just going to talk about mostly one event that took place while I was still in Berlin, and that was my parents' trip to come visit me because we went to the Netherlands to go to a family reunion. It was during my second year there that we went, and they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to come this month." I said, "Fine, give us the dates when you're going to arrive so we can put in appropriate leave forms and spend some of the time with you. We can't take leave the whole time you're here because we'll be PCSing soon and we want to take leave and see you at your place when we come stateside." So about a month later they wrote back, no, we're coming now later in the year because we got in contact with one of our cousins over in Holland or the Netherlands, and they said, "Come this month because we have a family reunion." And I'm like, wow, great. It's about time I get to see some of my overseas relatives, even though I'm overseas myself, but didn't know we had that many friendly folks in my family, but we do. So my parents arrive, and of course the first thing that happens is some of their luggage gets lost. So we have to wait a couple days for it to catch up to them and get into the town of Berlin or the city of Berlin, and then we got to go to the airport and pick it up. Because they actually had to claim it, which was really odd. Generally, Americans, you lose luggage, it comes to your door. Same thing happened to me in the Ukraine later on. They delivered. I don't know why Berlin didn't deliver it, but we had to go claim it. And that was quite interesting because there was a lot of luggage sitting inside this claims closet when we went there. And I was like, wow. Well, that's neither here nor there anymore. So we can take the duty train, which is a military transportation train, so to speak, run by I guess our government and the German government. So it's a free train for us U.S. soldiers to get out of Berlin. It takes you to Frankfurt. It only runs at night, so you don't see what the Soviets are doing in East Germany during the daylight hours. So we only run at night. And you got to stop and surrender your ID card and your passport. And then they got to make sure that we didn't kidnap any East Germans on the way in or to Berlin or to Frankfurt. Checking. Because that became important one time. I rode the duty train. We actually had a birth on it. So no birth certificate and no passport for a baby. And we were held up for about an hour or two because they had to prove that this lady gave birth, because they were thinking, oh no, you stole an East German baby. Yeah, the funs of the old Soviet days. So we rode up the Rhine River. We took a German train from Frankfurt up to Eindhoven, where my cousins lived in the Netherlands. And we went up along the Rhine River, and me being a military history buff, didn't have the internet. I had a Commodore 64 to play games at home, but no internet back then. So on the way up and on the way back on this trip, I forgot to look in the town of Remagen to see the standing towers where the Lutendorf Bridge used to be, because they didn't rebuild it after the war. They left the bridge. The bridge got destroyed in the war, so they left it down. Didn't need to cross here anymore, but I didn't get to see the towers that were still remaining on either direction. So we get into Eindhoven. Our cousin comes there to meet us, and they bring along some family friends of theirs because my parents are staying with my cousin, and me and my spouse are staying with friends of the family. So we have a wonderful evening. They introduced me to Amstel beer. They laid gifts on us like crazy. I got like a can opener, coasters, simple stuff for the Amstel label. I guess I should have got some of that stuff out for show and tell. Maybe I'll do that for next week. And also a transport pass to use the duty train. I still got a blank copy. I got some filled out, but I got some blank ones lying around here. So we spend a couple days before we go to the family reunion. And one evening we go for a walk in the local woods near Eindhoven. And my cousin points out that these are the remains of trenches, dugouts, whatever the Americans built in this area because they were being shelled at one time during the Operation Market Garden, so they had to have some protection. And this was the remnants of it. Not much, but a little bit of history there. Because the Dutch people love Americans, especially the two division, the airborne divisions that landed in their country during World War II. To the point where my cousin and his friend that we were staying with, they were compiling and tracking every 101st Screaming Eagle death throughout World War II, and they showed me the book. So they were in contact probably with most of the guys from Band of Brothers. Of course, back then I didn't know about the Band of Brothers coming, hitting us like 20 years later. So it was very interesting because they showed me they were finding all kinds of records. No matter if the guy got killed in France, Holland, or even later in Germany later on, they were tracking every single death, which was kind of amazing. And actually, the friend was actually invited to go to the Currahee Museum at Fort Bragg to do something. I can't remember what he did, but the 101st honors him because of his dedication to tracking where everybody died, more or less. So that was interesting. And his son built models, and he had like all the planes, all the tanks, mostly Tamiya brand, I do believe, of World War II. So he was quite heavily interested in World War II himself, his son. And his son was probably about my age back then at the same time. So day of the family reunion, we drive up in 2 cars. I don't know why because there were 6 of us. So we drove up in 2 cars, and my dad and my cousin, male cousin, they rode in 1 car, and for some reason I had to ride with the 3 females. I don't know why. Just the way it worked out. But I got to drive on the way home. So we go up to our what we call our hometown, which is Zutphen. Some people say Zutphen, but I call it Zutphen. I might be wrong. But before that, we go to a restaurant near our home city, and we fill up the place. There is cousins from all over. I'm looking at people my age, older than me, younger than me, and even ancient. I mean, we had a couple people there, I think in their 90s, that showed up. At that time, my cousin told me there's about 25,000 of us, and we're all interrelated because my great-grandfather, whose house got destroyed, that I will talk about here in a bit, he had 18 kids, and they've only tracked about half of those families. My cousin was tracking all the families and all the family members, and he showed us his book. And he showed me where I was at in it and all that, and my first marriage, my first 2 kids, and all that. So it was quite interesting. Long video. My mouth is drying out. So then we go to the town of Zutphen itself, and we go to where our house sat. What had happened is during World War II, our town didn't get too much damage, but when Hitler decided that he wanted to put V-1 launch sites, the V-1 bombs were the ones that just looked like a torpedo with a jet engine and the wings to stabilize it, and then they would launch them on these big rails. Well, they tore down our ancestral home to put a rail there, and supposedly my great-grandmother died of a heart attack when that happened, and my grandfather, he didn't live very much longer after that time. I can't remember exactly what he died of. So we go there, but next to where our house sat was a house similar to ours, and these people were gracious enough to open it up for us. And it was just a simple, I think 3 or 4 room house. That tells you how old it was. I mean, you had your main living area where you also ate and where the kitchen was, and really didn't have a living room, mostly just bedrooms, and I think they had indoor plumbing, I can't remember. So we had a good time. We talked to a lot of cousins. I found out that some of the cousins there had actually spent time in a Japanese prisoner of war camp because they were in the Pacific, and of course Japanese invaded the Dutch, West Indies are called? I think that's what they're called, and so they got captured there. They were interesting to talk to. I was quite surprised to find that out. As far as some serving time in German camp or prisoner of war camps. I once read a book where one of my cousins who was a minister was outspoken, and they said that he went to a camp, but which one I don't know, and I don't know if he survived the camp or not. But that was the only cousin that I could find, and I asked my cousin. They said no, they were just mostly being oppressed by the Germans occupying the Netherlands at that time, because the Germans look upon the Dutch as lesser Germans, so we're not very well liked by them during that time. So we spend a wonderful day there and meet a lot of cousins. I actually have a photo. I couldn't find it, but it's my picture of my father and 4 other individuals, all of the same generation, and all of them had the first name John, and 2 of them, like my father, had no middle name. So 5 Johns in one generation. Of course, look how large we are. That wasn't, and it was just strange, and it was real pretty. Our Zutphen was a walled city way back when, and it actually had a battle that took place during the when we were trying to get our independence from Spain. So if you don't know much about the Netherlands history, we were once ruled over and controlled by Spain, and we revolted against them. And my hometown was actually a walled city. We went to it, and I got those pictures on slides, and I never made any prints, but I got pictures of how thick the walls were. I was amazed. I mean, walled city, yes, I knew the walls were thick, but I didn't realize they were that thick. Very little of the wall is left that used to surround the city. And while we were there, my cousin took us, and if anybody's seen A Bridge Too Far, some of it was filmed inside of our city. They used I think it was an old church, they told me, but they converted it to an orphanage, and they used it in the movie for one of the German headquarters, because you see some of the Germans exiting the building and watching the planes in the sky when the paratroopers were landing. So my hometown is fairly good size. It's a nice city. I've only been there. I went back again later when I become a warrant officer. I'll talk about that when I go there again. Had a wonderful time. So it was like after 2 or 3 days, our trip was over with. We came home, and I think we had a layover in Frankfurt, if I'm not mistaken. So while we were in Frankfurt, we decided that let's do some shopping here in West Germany, which was a big mistake, because due to the fact that I was stationed in Berlin, I guess we got lots of stuff at our local base exchange. But like I said, I had a Commodore 64, but I didn't have a Commodore monitor, so we were sharing a TV set between playing games and watching VHS tapes back then. Yes, this is how old this is, VHS tapes. I still got some, believe it or not. I got all the formats I've had throughout my military career. So we got a monitor, so I got this huge box plus luggage, and we take the duty train back. And as a matter of fact, I think that's when the baby was born, because I remember we were sitting in Potsdam, and generally, like I said, it's an overnight thing, so we get in early in the morning, so we can't see nothing. But I remember by the time we got out of Potsdam, it was like early morning twilight. I mean, the sun was about ready to rise, and I'm like, we're still in East Germany? I think that's when the baby was born. So we had, like I said, we had a baby born on the duty train, which was really amazing. And of course, they had to prove that they gave birth. And so we get back, and I think my parents there were probably for another 1 or 2 weeks. They were there in October, but the German holiday markets don't open until about mid-November, if I remember correctly back then. So they get to seeing a Christmas market. But I got some time off because I was still working 6 and 3, so I had some days off, and some days they just sat at home, and I did very little out on their own because they just didn't want to get lost. And where we lived, you couldn't get lost, but they just felt that they might get lost, so they stayed home and did some other things. They had a wonderful trip. It was nice to see my folks. And so that's it, yeah. That's one of the events that happened while I was at Berlin. A wonderful event. Like I said, I went to a wonderful family reunion. Got to meet some cousins that I mean, a lot of us Americans, some of us, we have, you know, European ancestry. So there's a lot of cousins that you have overseas that you never meet, but you just hear about them. So I actually got to meet some. So this is Chief. I'm signing out. Long video probably. And like I said, freedom is not free. There's always a price to pay for freedom. And so like I say, hug a vet. You can't hug a vet, give him an elbow tap if you're up for elbow taps. If not, just give him a verbal thank you. And regardless of what his age is and what war he fought in, please. There's some Vietnam veterans around here in the neighborhood, and I thank them, and they're like, well, thank you. I know it's coming from another military member, but thank you. So, because those are the neglected soldiers, they really are. So again, Chief signing out. See you next week.